So this 55-year-old woman says, I will go out with you and fight myself to keep these Spanish away from our country. Okay, yeah, let's do it. Absolutely. That's one of those you're like, ready to go. And they go out there and they win. Okay. I cut off a little bit of what Dr. Sharma said, but his part is like, the part about being a mother is sometimes you just have to be there. And so while Elizabeth was never a mother to a physical child, she became the mother of England and helped create England into a superpower, which it will become in the future. And really, she is one of the people that helps propel it to that in its international reputation, its military prowess, its economic might, etc. She is one of the key figures in allowing that ascension to continue. Okay. And then she lives for another 15 years. She is one of the great supporters of Shakespeare, as you may know, supports him with royal funding and is a huge part of the Shakespearean experience. But she's probably best known for involvement with Mary Queen of Scots and her support of the military prowess of England and all that. So she is not tolerant by modern standards, but she is pretty tolerant of her day. Now, to close this out, you are being asked to compare and contrast the French and English wars of religion. I'll give you one for free. If you look at both the French and the Spanish, those conflicts involve actual violent war. The War of the Three Henries, the 80 Years' War in the Netherlands between the Spanish and the Dutch. The English Civil War is more about intrigue and spying and debate and some executions, but there is no actual England fighting in the, there is the Spanish Armada, but that's not really necessarily part of the English debate about religion. That is more about Philip getting, so it's not the same way that it is resolved, if you want to put it that way. There's not a battle that starts and ends, and when it ends, that's it. It's just more of a progressive time over time that Elizabeth is not going to make people be a certain religion. If they want to stay Catholic, they still have to come to English church. Yes, they got fined. But if you wanted to be a Catholic and practice in your home, Elizabeth didn't care. That wasn't something she was going to pursue. As long as you didn't try to assassinate her, and after Mary Queen of Scots is dead, everybody knows who her successor is going to be, so there's really nothing to worry about there. And so that kind of dies down, that intrigue and turmoil. So that is one example of something you could choose to write about. And again, your practice essay is due a week from Friday, the 9th. 4 paragraphs. If you want to shoot for the 5th post-context, that's fine. But my minimum expectation is 4 paragraphs. Your context, your thesis, your X, your A, and your B. If you have any questions over the coming week, if you would like to send me a message, I'm happy to respond, give you some advice, give you some help. But as long as you try those 4 paragraphs, you'll get 2 out of 2. I will grade it for real and tell you what you would have actually gotten. But I imagine most of you, this is just kicking off a little rust. You know how to do this. You've done it before. You'll do it again. Okay? Any questions about that? All right. Last little bit. We have one final act of the Wars of Religion to cover, and then we are done with it. We are almost done with the first unit. I think I mentioned this to you all as well. You may notice that your text skips around. You're not reading straight through. This textbook came out 10 years ago almost. The study guide that you're using as the basis and what I decided to teach you came out 2 years ago. So there is some material in there that's not in your book and vice versa. Also, your book is not strictly chronological. It's more thematic in certain ways. So I'm just having you skip certain stuff. We'll come back to it later, and in some cases, we won't come back to it at all. But I understand that. Follow the schedule. It is correct. Everybody good with that? All right, so let me do a couple things on the whiteboard, and then we're done for today. Couple of random bullet points in the study guide that are not in your textbook, so I can at least give you this information before you start to study in the next couple weeks. Again, I think I told you this, but over the break, I'm going to plan ahead for the next month. I'm also going to investigate. I have a couple leads on how to have you test in a secure fashion online, but also at some point, I'm just going to have to trust you. And if I can't trust you to take a test without cheating, then you probably don't belong in my class. So I do trust you all, but also I will verify that you're not doing things you shouldn't be doing. This gentleman's name is Jean Baudin. Jean Baudin is in your study guide as a bullet point example of a specific concept. Since his name is Jean Baudin, can we guess his nationality?
French.
Très bien, le gong, correct. All right, so he is a Frenchman. He is an official court advisor in the late 16th century. So Catherine of Medici, Henry IV, all that stuff, right in that time period. His major contribution is he writes a book on the principle of sovereignty. To be a sovereign is to be a monarch. That's another term, especially in England. They oftentimes will call, instead of saying king or queen, they'll call them my sovereign. It's from Latin, blah, 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 but it means the king or queen. And as you may know, this right here is the Latin root for monarch, for king. All right, so when you see that, that's why a king's rule is their reign. It comes from the root for king. All right, so sovereignty is pretty simple. It says that in a nation state, the monarch has the final say on what happens. They should have absolute authority to rule their society as they see fit. Who is that a shot at?
England?
Nope. This could be in any country. Even though the guy's French, this is a principle that many rulers will adopt all across the continent. There's very few people that can be applicable to people all across the continent at this time.
Spain?
Nope, it's not a country. It's a person.
The Pope?
Il Papa, yes, the Pope. This is official government policy. Stay in your lane, Holy Father. We love and respect you, but you're not appointing any more government officials. You don't get to have special privileges with our government. And most importantly, you don't get to dictate our rules anymore. So the movement that started with these so-called new monarchs in the late 1400s, Ferdinand and Isabella, soon to be followed by Henry VIII, is now official policy for most of the states of Europe. The Pope is important. We care about him. We want to listen to him on certain issues, but not about how to run our country. Stay out. So the new monarchs won. Their successors did. The Middle Ages, the Pope could tell any king what to do. By the late 1500s, that is no longer the case. So that's sovereignty. He writes this book. This book is produced all across the continent. Clearly other monarchs are down with this. They love it. So strong central government, absolute control. So he's a political philosopher, if you will. Kind of the Machiavelli of 16th century Europe, as opposed to Machiavelli, who was 100 years earlier. All right, another random person. In France, when Henry X dies, he is replaced by his son, Louis XIII. Do we all know basically how to read Roman numerals? If you don't, this would be a good time to say something. No shame, but now would be a good time, because I'm going to expect you to get this right. If you don't know, let me show you. So XIII, X13, what's Louis XIV look like?
It's XIV.
Correct. To do 4, we do the 1 and then the 5. It's almost like subtraction. What's Louis XVI look like?
XVI.
Yes. Louis XIV. Okay. Kids confuse that all the time, and trust me, Louis XIV and Louis XVI, very different. That is up your whole answer if you put the wrong thing on that one. All right. So Louis XIII, to be honest, we don't care about him. He doesn't really do anything remarkable outside of have Louis XIV as a child. So we don't really care about Louis XIII. But when Louis becomes the monarch, he is too young to rule. He's just a kid. So it means we have a regent, we have a regency, and until he becomes an adult. And what often happens is when that young monarch becomes an adult, their regent often hangs on as a chief advisor. In France, that will be the case. And that advisor and that regent is a man named Cardinal Richelieu. Cardinal Richelieu is a long-time AP European test favorite. Boy, they love him. Since his title is Cardinal, what was his original occupation? Who's he working for?
The church.
The church, correct. But his loyalty, trust me, is to France above all others. He will prove this because in the war we're getting ready to talk about, he actually has France support Protestant nations over other Catholic nations because he does not want those fellow Catholics getting too strong. Cardinal Richelieu will be the architect of the divine right monarchy of France. He will have young Louis XIII brought up that he is God's chosen messenger, that he can do no wrong because he has been divinely chosen, and that therefore he can govern as he likes. Who cares what the nobles think? Bring them in line. Who cares what the Pope thinks? Bring them in line. And while Louis XIII spends most of his time hunting and enjoying his mistresses, his son Louis XIV will be brought up the same way. And Louis XIV is generally seen as the epitome of divine right absolute monarchy. Louis XIV's famous phrase, "L'état c'est moi," I am the state. He literally is the government. And he meant it. That wasn't a clever phrase or a slogan. He meant it, I am the whole country. And he acted like it too. That probably would not have happened without the inspiration of Cardinal Richelieu, even though Cardinal Richelieu is dead by the time Louis XIV is born. So if you wanted a quick summary, who is he? He is the architect of French divine right absolutism. And nobody in Europe does divine right absolutism like the French in the 17th century. And we'll get into that later. That's next unit. If you like wigs and fancy clothes and gluttonous food consumption, you're in for it. We got lots of that. Like, I wonder what swan tastes like. They can tell you in France, in the royal court. Like, they ate swans. All right. Cool. All right. That's Cardinal Richelieu. All right, last thing for today. We have one more major all-out, knockdown, drag-out European religious war. And then for a variety of reasons, we just figure it isn't worth it anymore. We're going to stop killing each other primarily over religion. This war ends in 1648, which is the end date of time period 1. So that explains that this is a pretty important event. This war starts in 1618. So therefore, using your mathematical skills, what is the name of this conflict?
30 Years' War.
Yes, Owen. Thank you, sir. The 30 Years' War. This is a conflict that is fought exclusively in the HRE, even though numerous other people will join in. Basically, what happens is that this is a war that should have been a local conflict, but think about it in a typical high school hallway. If there is a fight, what is going to happen with people that aren't fighting? What are they going to do? They're going to record it, World Star, right? But they're going to show up. They're going to just like congregate. They want to watch. Let's say you're a bit of a psychopath maybe, and one kid just got knocked out. Like they got knocked down. They're just lying there like, ugh. You walk up, you don't think anybody's looking. You just kick the kid. Like, you don't have anything to do with it, but you're just like, rage. And you go kick this kid because you know they can't fight back. They're probably not going to know who you are because they're on the floor like dazed because they got whooped. That's what's going to happen here. This is a local conflict in the HRE. And eventually Spain's like, well, let's beat the crap out of some Protestants. Why not? And then France is like, we would like to, I don't know, kill the Protestants as well. And so they jump in. And then you got the Swedes show up. Sweden. A Borgie, because the only Swede I know is the Swedish chef from the Muppets. So that's all I got there. A Borgie, you know, that kind of thing. Everybody pretty much gets involved with this outside of the Russians, the Ottomans, and the British. Because the Ottomans got their own problems. Russia is like, niet. And then Britain's on their island going, you all are losers. And so they don't get involved. But pretty much everybody else is. Italians, Austrians, Danes, Swedes, Germans, Poles, Spanish, French, they're all up in this. So last 5 minutes, what causes this war? And then we will end, and next week we'll briefly do its effects, and then we're done with it. And we got a couple social and cultural things to finish on Tuesday of next week, and then that's it. And we'll look at starting to review, for our test. And we'll talk about what our test looks like and all that good stuff. Your test, as you see, will cover Well, I'll get into that later. There's no sense talking about it now. But I will come up with your schedule so you can see kind of what's coming, what days, all that good stuff. We will be doing some writing. We will be doing some multiple choice. And for any of you who are woefully behind, we will be checking your notebook. And since you have turned in your current events paper, if you find yourself, if you're not doing anything fun for fall break, which I imagine most of us aren't, if you have a little time, this might be a good weekend to catch up on some notes. Just to be clear, especially for people that are new to the Mr. Rich experience, I do not care how long your notes are. Now, if there's one line for a 10-page reading, that's probably a little shady. But if there's a paragraph per day and you're kicking butt on your exams, I'm not going to ask any questions. The only notes I do not accept are a list of nouns. If you just write words with no explanation, If you're writing it down, you should explain it. Otherwise, why write it down? Other than that, I don't care if it's bullet points. I don't care if it's Roman numerals. I don't care if you just write. They're not for me. I'm just checking that you have some. They must be labeled daily by page number or date. That is all on your period 1 guide. It says that at the top. Everybody clear on that? Ordinarily, it's handwritten only, but right now I'll take typed. If I have any inkling, it is not your work. As I'm sure you know, Google Classroom has a turn it in function, and I can search the internet with one click of a button for you getting these notes off the internet somewhere. And I have a good memory, and if your notes are exactly like someone else's, I will notice that, and that's going to just do the damn things. Half a page a day is not a whole lot of work, even if you're 3 or 4 days behind. Come on. Again, if you're not going to do notes, I don't think you need to be in my class. Just that simple. And if you don't want to do notes, you're going to be lazy all year long, and I'm going to be yelling at you all year long, and that's not healthy for either of us. I'm getting old. I'm not in great shape. I need to exercise more. I don't need stress in my life by yelling at you. And I'm going to. So, either do the work or do something else. Now, last little thing. The 30 Years' War starts very simply. It's about religion. The Holy Roman Empire is led by the Habsburg monarch. The Habsburgs of Austria are Catholic. If you go to Vienna today, on Sunday afternoons, most of the stores are closed. Even now. Are most people in church that morning? No, it's just like a family day. But as a tourist, you have to know that going to Austria, that you can't go shopping in most places on Sunday. Now, the tourist stuff's open, but like any nice stores or anything where you want, all that's closed. That's the influence of Catholicism now, even hundreds of years later. Okay? The emperor is very Catholic. He is also the Habsburg, so his name's Ferdinand VI. There is a province in the HRE called Bohemia, if I may be rhapsodic about it. It's terrible. Bohemia is today's Czech Republic. Its capital city is Prague. Prague has long been a center of Protestant descent. The Martin Luther, before Martin Luther was Martin Luther, is a guy named Jan Hus, who was executed by the church in 1415. There is a big old statue of him today in downtown Prague. Bohemia is very Protestant. The king of Bohemia dies unexpectedly. He's a young man. He has no younger siblings. He has no children. He is the end of his family line. There is a dynastic crisis. So while we figure out who takes his place, that's going to be months, maybe a year. The HRE emperor may appoint a temporary ruler. This is like if a senator dies, the governor of that state can appoint a senator until we have an election. Same concept. To use a modern word, the HRE emperor Ferdinand chooses to troll the Bohemians. He should have put in a Protestant. They are Protestant. They want a Protestant leader. They will have a Protestant leader again. He puts in a Catholic. Why? Just to make them mad. To troll them. To be a jerk. What he underestimates is how mad they get. We're talking riots. We're talking threatening of armies. It's bad. So Ferdinand realizes I went too far. He needs to apologize. He's not going to Prague to apologize. He sends 2 of his homies to go to Prague to apologize. They go to Prague Castle, which is just what it sounds like, on top of a hill. They walk in, immediately the nobles are, they don't even let the guy speak by all counts. and these two gentlemen representing the Holy Roman Emperor are taken to the next closest window 70 feet above ground level. That's 7 stories tall. Ballard is 2 stories tall. That is 3.5 Ballards. You will die most likely if you are thrown up that high onto the ground. At best, you're breaking a bunch of bones. They are thrown out the window in what is called the defenestration of Prague. To defenestrate someone is to throw them out a window. A great threat to issue, by the way. I will defenestrate you. Ooh. They land not on the hard ground below, but in a giant pile of manure. Duty. Now, was this intentional to be sending a message to the emperor about what they thought of his proposal? Perhaps. Was it pure coincidence? Who knows? But either way, they survived and they limped home. They limped home to Vienna smelling like poop. Now, in royal custom, you should receive the monarch's messengers as you would them. So by throwing these guys out a window and threatening their lives and them being covered with the feces, it is like you did that to the king. So Ferdinand has one response: war. We will go to war over you throwing out my emissaries into a giant pile of horse poop. And such the war begins. So the causes of the 30 Years' War would absolutely be a good short answer question. We will discuss its results next week. So again, I need you to do a couple things for me, beloved seniors. Number one,